So some of you have asked to hear more about this road trip that my family and I took. One of our stops was Mammoth Lakes. It's a resort community, skiing in the winter, hiking in the summer. It's on the eastern side of the Sierras. It's beautiful. And about 2 hours from Mammoth Lakes, down in Owens Valley, which is between the Sierras and Nevada, is Manzanar. So for those that don't know, there were over 100,000 Japanese citizens and residents who were imprisoned during World War II for fear that they might collaborate with the Japanese Empire. And Manzanar was the largest of the internment camps. So my family and I left the pristine lakes and the cool pine forests in the mountains, and we drove down to the valley floor, and it was 109. And in this dry, desolate valley, we went to the National Monument of Manzanar, which contains replicas of the barracks, the latrines, the mess halls, and the guard towers, 1 square mile where 10,000 people lived for 3 years. It's moving to see the terrible conditions that they lived in. And of course, it sparked conversations in our family about what were the concentration camps like in Europe for our own people. There were many moving things to see. One of the few pieces of the original camp that was left standing is a white stone obelisk in the cemetery. But the thing that moved me the most was a tattered American flag flying over the camp. It had been torn by the fierce wind and the blasting dust of the desert. Now, normally, if I saw a tattered flag aloft, I would be upset. The American flag is a sacred symbol of democracy and the values the United States represents to ourselves and to the world. A broken flag should be retired with respect and proper ceremony. But somehow, that damaged flag flying over Manzanar, as we listened to the ghosts of the interned whispering in the oppressive heat, seemed like the right symbol for the betrayal of American values that happened there. Now, I want to reassure you, this is not a sermon criticizing the United States, because during that same period in history, millions of Americans were making sacrifices both at home and abroad to preserve democracy, freedom, and human rights for the world. This will not be a sermon criticizing the United States. This will be a sermon asking the question whether something sacred, like an American flag, can lose its sacred status, and can it regain its sanctity? This week in the Torah portion, we read about the golden calf and the smashing of the tablets. And in this retelling, you have to stop and wonder, how did Moses dare to smash tablets that had been written by the hand of God? How do you take something that sacred and throw it on the ground and break it, even if you're mad? Now, perhaps you might think, well, he was so shocked to see the debauchery of the golden calf, he became enraged, and it was the first thing at hand, and he shattered it. Maybe, but if you look at the verses closely, before he goes down the mountain to react to the people who are dancing with the golden calf, God warns Moses. He says, you have to go back to the camp because they're committing acts of idolatry. So this was not a surprise to Moses when he arrived. I don't think he was startled or enraged to the point where instinctively he would smash the tablets. And what's also interesting, it's pointed out by the Or HaChaim. If you look at the verse closely, before Moses smashes the tablets, it says he took the tablets with both of his hands. Wait a minute. If he's carrying the tablets down the mountain, why does he have to take the tablets with his 2 hands? Isn't he already holding them? And so the Midrash teaches a beautiful story that when the tablets were written by God's hand, they were imbued with such sanctity that they floated before Moses. They were magical, and of their own majesty, they came down the mountain with him in midair. But the moment Moses beheld the golden calf and the debauchery of the people around the calf, the tablets lost their sanctity. They became heavy as stones do. Moses was able to grasp them out of the air and smash them. So that's the answer to my first question: can a sacred item lose its sanctity? And the answer is yes, if we betray the values that object represents. The tablets represented the relationship between the people and God. And when the people worshiped the golden calf, they were betraying their relationship with God and the values they held in common. And those tablets became like a love letter from a cheating lover. The words weren't even worth the paper they were written on. What about the second half of my question? Can something that loses its holy status become sacred again? According to the Das Kenim, the answer is yes. And he brings us that beautiful quote from Ecclesiastes, "To everything there is a season." And one of the verses in that part of Ecclesiastes says, there is a time for casting stones and a time for gathering stones. And Das Kenim says, those stones refer to the two tablets. There was a time when it was right to smash them, to cast the stones. But there was also a time to gather up the pieces. And those pieces ended up inside the ark, next to the second set of tablets that Moses got when he went back up the mountain and were kept in the ark as our sacred laws. The broken tablets were put in a sacred space next to the whole tablets. They weren't left behind, and only sacred objects can go in the ark. So the answer to the second question is yes, something that has lost its sacred status can regain it. I see the tattered flag flying over Manzanar as sacred in its broken state. Maybe it flies there to remind all of us that if we can learn from the injustice that happened in Manzanar and become a better democracy because of it, then we will recognize what there is to lose and will fight harder to preserve freedom and human dignity. Nations are messy and complicated. They do some good things, they do some shadowy things. Ours has achieved so much to further the well-being of humanity, but it has had shameful moments too. And like countries, people are messy and complicated. We're moving towards the high holidays. There are parts of ourselves that are broken. There are relationships we have managed to shatter. We've disappointed or hurt loved ones. We've hurt ourselves by not living up to our potential. We've betrayed God's trust in us to make this world the best world it can be. But the message of the high holidays is not what we've destroyed is permanently damaged, that it's lost its sanctity. Bless you. The message of the high holidays is our infinite capacity to repair what's been broken, and to see that holiness can be restored even to that which seems hopelessly desecrated. May we be blessed to pick up the pieces, to learn from our darkest moments, and realize this is a season for tshuva, for return and restoration.